I'm here. I'm so happy to be here with Dr. Gilda Carle. Everyone knows her as Dr. Gilda from her years as the Love Doctor on MTV. But Dr. Gilda is a relationship and business expert. In fact, she combines relationship and business strategically, which is an incredible gift. And she is also the author of 19 books. And I have to tell you, Dr. Gilda, that as I'm preparing to write my very first book, I can't believe how much work it is to write and publish a book. I can't imagine that you could have, it's like having 19 children. Who does that?
That is very true, because when you do give birth to a book, it is your child, and you are protective of it, and yet you want it to get out there. You want to give the book some free rein, but you don't want to give too much free rein because you're afraid it will get lost in the wrong environment, in the wrong hands. So you're very protective, and yet you can't be. You just have to allow it to flow into the ethers. So
Wow.
I feel for you. The first book I wrote was amazing. It was just amazing. I just spilled out my gut, and I just kept spilling and spilling. And I said to the editor, "Will you tell me when this is over? When, tell me when I should stop, because you have no idea how to do that and when to do that, because you're just on a roll." And with this last book I wrote, this is the book, Real Men Don't Go Woke. With this one, it was originally titled something else, and it was all about men. Somehow I got this word from above that since I had written for women for all these years, it was necessary, mandatory, that I address men and their problems, because I had been seeing so much dysfunction. So I got this word, and then it was called something else. And I took this to a top-notch agent in New York who informed me, and the word woke wasn't even in the title. She informed me that the major publishers will not publish a woke book, an anti-woke book. And I wasn't upset in any way, because I had done this research saying that these young women in their 30s, and those are the editors of these book companies, those women are all woke. The problem is that the men have been veering towards conservatism. And so nobody's able to find each other. The women say, "How do I find a man?" And I keep saying, you can't cancel him, for one thing. You can't castrate him. You can't make him feel less than when he approaches you or when he talks to you about anything. And they don't want to hear that. Anyway, so in terms of this book, she said that had to be published by the major publishers. And I could have gone to a smaller publisher. But then I said, you know what? I want total control. If this is such a scary concept for so many people, or for these people in this group, then I'm going to change the title and include the word woke in it. It was like, screw you. This is ridiculous. And since this is my 19th book, I've been around the world a couple of times in the book industry. And I had big publishers publishing my books early on. And it was fraught with all kinds of problems. They wanted one cover, I wanted another cover. The cover that they chose was not reflective of what was inside the contents. And these were big
Yeah.
conglomerations making decisions for my baby.
Yeah.
It gets back to your baby.
Yeah.
And this time I said, that's it. So I found a publisher, and I published it myself. I paid for it, and I published it myself. I have had books published by the majors. And then I've gone to Amazon. I've had books published by Amazon. That's a very simple process. But this was different. I didn't want this to be published on Amazon. I wanted this to be specific to the way I envisioned it. And it's interesting because the hardcover, it almost looks like a men's manual, You never see books that look like the people who are supposedly buying them and reading them. So I wanted it to be attractive to men. This is after publishers for years told me men don't read self-help, but this is not self-help. This is all about men and encouragement for them to take care of themselves.
So that's a great message. And for whoever doesn't know this about me, my previous podcast was directed exclusively at divorced fathers. And my podcast was called Undeletable Dad. It's still there. So we know this about each other already, but there's some
Right.
synergy in our drive to help men in a specific area of life. So I know that I'm not sure if we're in Mental Health Month or Men's Mental Health Month.
It's Mental Health Week and Men's Month. Men's
Ah,
men's wellness, men's health, and I think it's mental health this week.
yeah.
Been doing a lot of radio shows and people are combining the two. That's why I sound so idiotic about this. But the point is, suddenly, men are given a platform and at least an opportunity to hear what's going on. And I recently posted something on some of my social media, and LinkedIn is where I hang out a lot. Intelligent people who understand the way of the world. And I said, the number one killer of men under 50 is not disease, it's suicide.
Isn't that incredible? That's
And
awful.
and it went on. These were not my words. These were taken from an Instagram guy by the name of Piece of Deece on Instagram. And he goes on, men are dying in silence and nobody's talking about it. Every year, 1.6 million men attempt to take their own life. 525,000 men lose the fight against themselves every year. Not to illness, not to violence, but to suicide. And it goes on about how these guys present themselves looking like everything's happy. Their life is working and they're feeling great about themselves. And nobody would ever know that there is a silent killer behind them that they will not talk about because they don't want to sound weak.
Mm.
So I posted that. And Tracy, I was amazed. So many men said, I had no idea that this exists. Then up men saw what I posted and started to share how they too had been feeling this way. And because men traditionally don't reach out and say, I want some help, I need therapy, I need some help of some kind, they will not do that. Because of that, in my book, I use all pop culture references that people know. So I talked about Howie Mandel, for example. Happy-go-lucky. Doesn't he look happy? He has been suffering from depression for years. Pete Davidson, the stud, the young stud who has every gorgeous woman on his arm, he has been hit devastatingly with depression. John Fetterman, who is speaking out about every kind of imaginary thing in the world. But John Fetterman is a Democrat. Howie Mandel is probably a Democrat. Pete Davidson is probably Democrat. These are Democratic men. And then there's Simon Cowell. Doesn't he look like the tough guy who tells people you can't sing, you can't act, you can't dance, and suffering in silence? And he too was refusing to get any kind of help because he didn't want to seem weak. And that's the running theme. And I mention these and other men in Real Men Don't Go Woke. And male readers have said to me, thank you for mentioning these names. I had no idea. I thought I was all alone. So if the book has done that, For a sector of our population, thank you, God, I am so lucky that I have hit nerves, at least to raise awareness. And as you know, with your practice, you cannot get healed from anything unless you have awareness that this is what's going on, first and foremost.
Yeah. So, of course, it's an extremely provocative title, and you do that on purpose because you want people to read the book. But
Yeah.
what is it in particular about wokeism? I don't know another way to say it, that is dangerous or difficult
Well,
for the male population in particular.
here's the way I describe it. And the book is doing very well, by the way. So even though the major publishers would not publish this, people have found it and are finding it. And it's from all over the world. I just heard from a woman today from Africa saying, I love this. I mean,
Nice.
how I didn't even know Amazon goes that far. But it's incredible that the title has shaken people into some kind of reality of wanting to read it. And that's what I want people to read it. Somebody called it, this is a love story for men. It's beautiful. It's talking about men's vulnerability. Here's how I describe it. A man walks out the door and he's automatically called toxic.
Right.
One man said to me, and this is on my website, drgilda.com, he said, I am a man, and I know I'm a man, and this man is in Belgium. And he said, I know I'm a man, but all this toxic talk has really gotten to me. And now I declare myself as a non-binary. So he's turned the whole thing around because he doesn't want to hear it anymore.
Yeah.
Another man said that it has saved his life. He got this book just at the moment that his woman left him and he lost his job and he lost all his money and he didn't know what he was going to do with his life. And suddenly he found this book and it prevented him from going off the rails and perhaps taking his life, which he contemplated. These are all testimonials on my website. And it's important that other men recognize that this is going on with people other than themselves.
Yeah. I think women in general, and obviously we can't generalize to every single individual person, but in general, women are talkers. Women have networks of people, and women like to, or they are used to talking about their personal problems with each other. It's something
Mhm.
that women do together. And
Exactly.
seemingly men do not enjoy those kind of networks, and it makes
No.
them then very isolated when they are going through something like this. And I know certainly you were talking about divorce, or not divorce, but suicide statistics are it's tragic in the population of divorced fathers who are having a lot of difficulty getting access to their children, or the things that happen in very high conflict situations. Terrible high suicide rates in that population, which is it's just completely tragic. I know that a lot of women might say, this sounds ridiculous. Men have all the platforms. Men are controlling everything. How can it be that they are underserved in any way? Men have all the control of everything. What would you say to that?
It's not true. It's not true. Michelle Obama recently came out and said the emphasis is on men, not women, in our health care. And statistics have proven her wrong. It's the women, it's the men who are falling behind. And the emphasis has been on women's health. So people have a misconception, and it is a misconception, that it's a man's world. If you really think it's a man's world, then you haven't really looked at the power that you truly hold as a woman.
Yeah.
Because we are in total control as to whether we want to date somebody, whether we want to leave a relationship. Most of the divorces are initiated by women. And a recent study I saw showed that men are more dependent on relationships than women are. The things the old wives' tales, that we have been taught are not accurate. And it's shameful because men feel it and men internalize it because they're not reaching out to one another. Men compete with each other. They'll sit side by side. They won't sit face to face. They purposely compete, and they don't want to tell their buddies that they are suffering. And so it is a silent suffering. And that's the danger. So we find that men are 4 times more likely to commit suicide than women. We find that the testosterone levels have been plummeting. The Y chromosome has been thinning out, and that's the declaration of malehood. We find that the amount of loneliness, now this is a worldwide problem, loneliness, but the amount of loneliness in our men has gone up so drastically, and the amount of depression in men has gone up very drastically. And if there is a workplace death, 90% of those deaths are men. So what are we doing that is not supporting our men well enough? And you talk about, many of them lose their lives after they have lost in a court of law, lost the right to see their children. They turn around and say, what is life all about? I'm not able to see my kids. I'm not able to have a relationship anymore. I'm paying through the nose so that I can't even start another family in a better situation. What am I to do? So this is what I have found. And the book is not a la-di-da. I woke up in the middle of the night and decided to write from the heart. This is all data enriched and data supported. And it's interesting. I had a book signing. I live in Scottsdale, Arizona. I had a book signing in Scottsdale with some very lovely, tuned in people. And usually, typical book signings, or 10 people show up. Maybe 20 people show up on a good day. This place was packed. And the doors, we had to leave the doors open because people were flooding outside. And I have this on videotape on my website, drgilda.com, because I wanted people to see there's not only men who are hearing this message, it's women as well. And I went ahead and told them about the statistics. I went ahead and told them all the stories of what I found as a result of doing all this research. And then I said, and boys as young as 10 are committing suicide.
Wow.
And the crowd just looked at me. That's insane. And it does sound insane. And then we all went home. And one of the participants came to me the following day and said, I can't stop crying. My best friend's son, 13, committed suicide last night while you were talking about young boys committing suicide. This is tragic. And you think, why? Why? Even if a boy is bullied in school, tendency is not to tell his parents or tell anybody because he's ashamed of seeming too weak to defend himself. So again, the internalization, and this is so damaging, as you internalize it, and then all of a sudden, the warm bottle of champagne goes pop. Yeah, that's what happened with Will Smith. He's another person I talk about in the book. He had put a lid on his emotions and what was going on inside him for so many years. And then he married a woman who supported his negative feelings of self. And she did some very damaging things to him by telling the world she was having an affair with their son's friend. It was disgusting what had gone on, especially playing out in public. And when he went up and slapped,
Oh, I'm blanking too.
yeah, I was suddenly blanking. Oh my!
I don't know the story.
I'll get it. Okay, I'll get it. But when he went up and did his slap, it was devastating. People in the audience thought that he was kidding. because he is such a brilliant actor. He is so brilliant. Chris Rock.
Yeah.
When he went
Thank
up,
you.
slapped Chris Rock. I have all these names.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when he went up and slapped him, and people thought it was part of the act because he is funny and he's good. And what he does is just brilliant acting. And suddenly he was outside of the act and he lost himself. And I have seen men rage. When they get into that moment, they don't even know what's happening to them.
Yeah.
They blank out. And later on, one of his friends, Tyler Perry, said he spoke to him afterwards. And Will Smith said, "What just happened?" I don't think that was acting because I've seen it myself. He had no idea. He had just lost himself. So not only do I say this is a problem, but I give remedies, how to look at yourself, how to say, this is good for me, this is not good for me. What are some of the things that I'm looking to achieve? What are some of the obstacles that have been standing in my way? What am I responsible for? And a lot of men do not want to take that responsibility. A lot of people in general don't want to take that responsibility. I did a radio show in New York, and a man called. It was a call in. A man called me, and he said he had just ended his marriage, and he was miserable and typical. And he said, "I don't know what to do. Where can I meet women?" And I said, "You shouldn't be out there meeting women right now. You've got to take apart the whole scenario and find out what role you played in this." He didn't want to hear it. He
Yeah.
said, "You mean I'm supposed to put myself on ice, Dr. Gilda?" I said, "I'm afraid so until you figure this out, because I guarantee if you don't, my promise to you, you will repeat the same behaviors
And
again.
nobody
Just
wants to
different
believe
mind."
that.
That's right. He hung up on me. He didn't want to hear this.
Yeah. No, I like that a lot. And taking responsibility is a huge theme in the work that I'm doing as well, because that is like a key that opens up a whole world of when we talk about moving to another level of consciousness and more ability to reach your potential and expand your potential. That is a crossroads, that idea of taking responsibility for your circumstances, for your emotions, that not allowing yourself to believe that other people are responsible for everything that's happening to you. It's so easy to just point your internal finger outside, and it's a very difficult step, but it's so crucial to any kind of healing process.
Now that I'm single again, I have seen lots and lots of men of different ages walk around with what Carolyn Mace calls woundology.
Mm,
And they all talk about, so many men talk about, "Oh, this happened to me, and this happened to me, and this happened to me." And it's always, I was the victim, and my
mm.
wife did this, and my kids did that. And we go on and on. And when I ask, "What role did you play in this?" "I couldn't help it. She was just this way." And okay, so we go back, I go back further. So I'm doing these mini therapy sessions, and I don't want to be on a date and do mini therapy. And I'm saying to them, "Then why did you find her attractive enough to marry her?" I made a mistake. And I said, "And who are you attracting these days?" And they go into a song and a dance, and they haven't really unraveled what happened in their marriage. And it could have been 20 years ago, but they don't want to know. The pain is too great. Men will not reach out for help. And this is one of my goals. I'm part of a wonderful organization called International Council for Men and Boys. And it's incredible. We are hearing from people from internationally all over the world, and how Men are feeling so inadequate. They are being killed by the court systems in all these different countries. We think we're in the West, we're so much more civilized. No, we're not. And they're being crippled. They can't afford to start anew because they're being strangled by all the amount of money that they have to pay to their ex-wife, who already has picked up and gotten a job and or is on welfare, or she's getting other monies in addition. And here's the guy trying to figure out life. And he can't even afford to go to therapy.
Yeah. And I know people are listening and saying, that's so wrong because I'm in the opposite situation. I'm not getting any money and I'm raising my kids on my own, or I know someone in that situation. And of course it happens the other way around. But I have to say that I know where you're coming from because I have also looked at the statistics. And despite there will always be a presence of people of both genders who are being disserved by the court system. But in fact, it is true that men are disproportionately getting the short end of the stick. And the fact that they then end up with the emotional processing that isn't able to happen because have they haven't been raised with these tools. They haven't come to this age with the skills to unpack their feelings in the way that women often have just been, I'm not going to say conditioned, but they have practice. We have practiced.
Well, and we also have our girlfriends. And so we'll
That's what I
cry
mean. That's what I mean to say.
Yeah, but the guys don't have that.
Yeah.
So it's horrifying to think that they're going to go to suicide rather than reveal to somebody that they're vulnerable. And I use that word a lot. I am saying, as people say all kinds of critical things when they see the title of the book. And one guy said, I believe that men should be strong and they should be able to show their feelings. And I said, I'm right with you. As a matter of fact, I want strong men, but I also want vulnerable men. And I told an Army fighter pilot that I found him most attractive when he demonstrated his vulnerability. Do you know he got angry at me? He said,
Mm.
what do you mean? But he thought I was expressing that he showed his weakness. And that's not it. Vulnerability is beautiful. You're saying, I feel. Well, hallelujah. I don't
Mm.
want to be with an automaton. I want to be with somebody who feels, not crying and screaming.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the only thing we as a culture have allowed men to feel is anger.
That's very astute.
Thank you.
That's
But,
very
you know,
astute. It's
but,
true. That's the
but
one emotion that's completely acceptable to express. So it only makes sense that all the other feelings get transmuted somehow into anger. That's the way they get offloaded.
But we also know that an angry woman is awful to look at. We never want to see an angry woman. But as far as a man is concerned, somehow the culture has equated angry men with powerful men. He's angry. Look how powerful he is. That is such another myth. And we've got to understand that.
Yeah.
I was having an argument it was a heated argument with my former fiance. And I said, you can't talk to me this way. That's not okay. And he said, our anger just shows how much we love each other.
Oh
No,
boy.
he told me everything I needed to know about how he viewed himself and his relationships with the world. And I said, no, that is not love at all. That's anger, pure and simply, that has not been leashed. And I have a 3-step program that I talk about. Frame it, claim it, tame it. If you're burbling up with anger, you step back and put yourself in a picture frame and see yourself in a way that you have never seen yourself before, almost as though you're watching yourself on video. You see yourself in this frame. When you are distant and watching all this interaction occur, then you say, claim it. Then you use the claim it step. That's where you claim, I am so pissed off. And then ask yourself why. Are you angry because your ex-wife 20 years ago cheated on you? Are you angry because your kids have abandoned you now that they're grown a little bit and they're listening to their mother? Are you angry that a professor in one of your classes didn't give you a good grade? All this buried stuff. And that's for you to claim on your own. And then the third step is the simplest. Tame it. And that doesn't mean tame her or tame him, whomever you're angry with. That means you know the source and you've watched this happen. You see it's ugly. You see it's getting you nowhere, but louder and louder. What are you going to do about it? Tame your emotion so you calm down and you could look at this in a much more logical fashion. So I developed the 3-step program, Frame It, Claim It, Tame It, for men in particular to understand that this is not the way to live. And the hardest thing is what men tell me is when they're in that rage to remember to step back and frame their anger, to remember 3 steps.
So tell me more about tame it. What do you suggest for people in terms of getting control over this highly emotional state?
First, you have to recognize what's happening to you because, as I said earlier, with Will Smith or anybody else we have watched who's very angry, you have to understand what's going on at the moment that it's going on. It's not good enough to say, man, I was so angry. I was so upset. I just let my emotions run away with me. You could say anything ex post facto. That's not going to help you in the moment. This is momentary. That's why I made it so simple. Frame it, claim it, tame it. You step back and you frame what's going on. And then you claim how you're really feeling. The rest is so easy. Then once you own it, you can control it. But unless you identify what's happening to you, you're never going to be able to control it. You cannot control that which you do not know.
Yeah. Yeah. I like to say that any uncontrolled emotion is being generated by a lie that you're telling yourself every single time. Every single time.
We
It's
tell
never what you think. It's
no.
never what you think. It's never that obvious.
One of my guiltograms is the issue we see is never the real issue because it's an 80-20 Pareto principle all over again. 20%, the tip of the iceberg, and you don't see what's beneath that. And until you get into the beneath, then you're not going to be able to do anything because what you're doing or what you're trying to do or what you're even complaining about is off surface. It's all superficial.
If this book helps people to feel okay about digging into parts of themselves that they have been avoiding, this will be a great gift to the world.
Pray, but I don't let women off the hook either. At the end of the book, that's the section where I get into, so what are we supposed to do as women watching all this? And I talk about until we as women know ourselves and know what we really want, then we are never going to allow our men to have the freedom and the space to express themselves. So it depends upon us, but we have to make men because we know how afraid they are of expressing their emotions. That's our job, to make them feel safe. It's our job for the environment. It's not our job to control their emotions. Nobody can control anybody else's emotions, but it's our job to set the environment up in a way that is as safe as possible. And women have never thought in those terms. We're just here, bloody-da. We do our hair, we do our makeup, we do a lipstick, and we're out the door. And that's all we have to worry about. Not quite. We have a responsibility to our men, because when we show that responsibility to our men, we're also showing that responsibility to ourselves.
As you were talking just now, and of course, I think I know what you mean. So I'm just going to play devil's advocate here just a little bit, but you're not suggesting something that could be, let's say, infantilizing your
No.
partner by making it safe for him to express his
Oh, no.
emotions.
I'm glad you asked that question, because that could be a misinterpretation also. No, you provide a safety hatch where if he slips and tells you, I'm feeling blah, 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 don't cut him off.
Mm,
Let him express. Say, I'm really interested in hearing this. Tell me more. That kind of safety
right.
will make a man feel as though he is being provided for in ways that he's not being provided for outside the home.
Yeah, these are good, really good communication skills that I think everyone should have in their relationship, but it is so easy to jump right in when someone is expressing how they feel and saying that's not true, or how can you say that because blah blah blah. It's really easy for us to just jump right into the story, and I think this is a space where everyone has to step back and frame what's happening and just
How,
to allow space for each other to express how we feel without interruption.
how can without interruption, that's the word, how could somebody be so egocentric to say, oh no, that's not right. You can't feel, you don't feel it.
That happens all the time.
I know, and that is part of our palaver, and that is part of the danger in relationships. You are denying somebody's emotion when he was, what is the word? When he was raw enough,
Mm.
open up to you, and he gave you a hand, and you did not take that. You cut it right off, and you said, no, you can't feel that way.
Yeah, people need language to do these things. They need examples of what to say in this kind of situation so that they don't default to their old thing. They don't know what else to say if they're not going to say the usual that's not right.
There was a woman who I was counseling, and I do counseling, and people come onto my website, drgilda.com, and they can sign up for counseling. And it's not counseling as people know it. It's coaching, it's supporting, it's loving, it's hugging, and it's all online throughout the world. And I have dealt with heads of countries, heads of companies, heads of households. It doesn't make a difference. When somebody is feeling raw and emotional and they feel they have nowhere else to go, they need something. There are hugging organizations that provide people to give you hugs. There are all kinds of self-help opportunities out there for you to be able to help yourself. But it's taking that first step. And if you take one little step and the next thing is though you are cut off because your feelings are told, that's not important. You're wrong. You don't need that. Oh, you should not feel that way. Who is so presumptuous to say you should not feel that way. That is terrible.
Well, of course, nobody would want to be told the same thing themselves. You have to just be able to imagine that when you are unburdening yourself, you don't want someone else to negate what you're feeling. That's
No,
really hard. But these are basic, really important communication skills for relationships. And I'm happy that you've included that in your book, because we need to be able to take practical steps and say, okay, then what do I say? Then what do I say? What's the next thing in the conversation? People need a script, actually, to get
well,
started, at least in having these kind of open conversations.
you're talking about that. What comes to mind is when people are angry at somebody, what do they tend to do? They tend to gunny sack all their grievances that they have never spoken up about. And like Santa Claus's band, a big gunny sack is right behind them. And when my sister was over and you did this, and then when my son did that, you did that. And here's this guy who doesn't even remember half of these things, doesn't understand why all of a sudden the woman is putting him on the red, on I shouldn't say on the red carpet,
No, the other kind of
on the
carpet.
other, on a bad carpet, and she is saying all these things that he can't deal with. You have to understand that the average person can deal with 3 new things at once. It used to be 7, just like the digits on a telephone, but that has changed a lot. We are the worst culture for listening to one another. And I used to run listening training for executives. And they thought, what a joke. What do I need that for? And then when they got into it, they recognized that this was a foible that was hurting their bottom line, because in assessments, a lot of their employees, their subordinates, would say he never listens. He doesn't listen. He doesn't hear what I have to say. And I started out the book talking about when I was on Wall Street in a company, and I had a group of, I think it was 12 men sitting around heavy mahogany table. It was a very masculine environment. And I was called in, the woman. And I said, I shouldn't be too difficult for you to deal with, because, in your circles, I'm just a woman. I'm not one of your competitors. So I have been called in to see what we could do about the bottom line. And we spoke, and every single man said, my boss doesn't listen to me. My boss never gave me the raise I deserve. My boss never gave me a promotion. I just, as the outsider, said, have you ever asked your boss? And they said, he should know. And I said, you sound like Cinderella. What do you mean he should know? How could he possibly know? He's not a mind reader. Don't you understand that he is trying to kill off the sharks that are circling him himself to prevent them from eating him alive? So you think he's going to worry about you? You've got to communicate with him. And they said, but if I communicate with him and if I tell him how I feel or what I would like, he'll think I'm whiny. I said, no, if you do it in such a way that will let him know that you deserve a raise because of, and you prepared all this material beforehand, how can anybody argue with that? So again, it's not so much in what you say or what you're demanding. How about instead of demand, you command by standing
Right.
tall and exercising your capital I am this manager, and do it with a spine that is steady, and say, this past quarter, I did A and B and C and D, and I think I deserve a raise right now. The worst that he could say is no. And if he does say no, that tells you a lot of other things. You may decide to see what else is around.
Right.
This is information that you need. But what were these men doing instead? Sitting at my conference table and steaming, furious that they were furious after I worked with them. They were furious that they had never taken that opportunity to walk into the boss's through the door and into his office and say, I believe I deserve this, and here are the reasons. Now that takes gumption. But if you don't promote yourself, who is going to?
There you have it. There you have it. It's nobody else's job to recognize first what your strengths are. You have to lead with believing in yourself and knowing what you're worth. And then other people can reflect that back to you.
But Tracy, that is the acknowledgement of who you really are, not the patina that you're presenting to the world, but who you really are. And you cannot know who you really are unless you've done the internal work and unless you are fearless about finding out why. And I don't know whether you can say we're raising a flock of uncurious men or men that don't want to know more, or they are so afraid of finding something out that they're not going to be able to sustain themselves if they ever hear the truth. But there's a whole bunch of material in here that I talked about the people pleaser. And because men would rather be the good guys, the people pleasers, which is a
A
lot.
yes, man.
The yes man. And a guy walked into my apartment and he said, I had never met him before. We had spoken on the phone and we started to talk. And he said, I'm a people pleaser. I said, that's that's not a good thing. That's a deal breaker, in fact. He said, what? He thought he was boasting that he was such a people pleaser and such a good thing. I said, no, because people pleasers are liars and they will kiss whatever ass is convenient so they can get to what they want. The problem is that all these asses are lined up and they've kissed the wrong asses too many times and they find out that they're on the losing end of the proposition.
Listen, this is a brilliant conversation. We could go on and on all evening, but I'm very happy that you agreed to come on my podcast and tell people once again where to find you.
Simple as pie, drgilda.com, DRGILDA. If you forget that, come to LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, blah, blah, blah. Everything is TikTok/Dr. Gilda. Instagram/Dr. Gilda.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you once again. And yeah, I really appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Tracy. A pleasure.